Didn't Jesus say today is the first day of the rest of your life somewhere?
He did not say that. Jesus never says that.
This is the Gospel of Musical Theater, a priestly look at some of your favorite musicals, with your hosts, Cathedral Deans and Musical Theater Queens, Nathan LaRude and Peter Elliott.
Welcome to the Gospel of Musical Theater. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Peter, and we are so excited to have this one episode, although we might get talking and it may go on longer.
Oh, God. Don't tempt the gods, Peter.
Pick up Season 2 of Apple TV's Schmigadoon.
Yes, Schmicago.
Schmicago.
I don't think that's its official. Every time I've gone searching for it, it is still called Schmigadoon Season 2. Although this is very clearly, we are in a different world than Schmigadoon.
We're in a very different world. And we're recording this just days after the final episode dropped. So I think, for me anyway, I'm still absorbing this musical theater post the golden age of musicals on shuffle. So we're no longer in the world of Music Man, Oklahoma, Carousel, etc. that we were in the first season. We have shifted really a generation, if you want to think about it that way, right? And now in the world of Stephen Schwartz and Andrew Lloyd Webber and Stephen Sondheim and no happy endings here.
No happy endings. Well, yeah.
I want to.
That's where. Well,
yeah. Because I mean, I think if the typecast is that musical theater of the golden age all has happy endings,
right?
I think that's kind of mischaracterizing the golden age in some way.
I agree. Although they play with that idea in Schmigadoon Season 1, right? Which is very much about true love. And I think we're sort of playing with the idea of golden age musicals are supposed to end with a marriage. They don't, actually, as you and I have, as you just said, they don't all. In fact, many of them don't. So I think Schmigadoon Season 1 is playing with the idea of what is true love. How do you know when you found it? That becomes the thing that they're looking for in order to get them across the bridge, remember?
Right.
So Season 2, they come into it, and here the question is happiness, right? Josh and Melissa have been married, they're trying for a baby, they bought a house together, they're successful in their careers, and they are not happy, right? And that's, Josh comes to Melissa and says, why don't we? And she immediately says, yes, let's do it. Like, they both have been thinking, it's time for us to go back to Schmigadoon. What they're trying to do is go back to the 40s, 50s golden age world of, like, that's what they're hoping to find, right? Is Brigadoon. They want to get back to the enchanted world where I think Melissa even says, like, I miss all of the happy colors and everybody singing happy songs about love. That is not what they find.
And it's left you wanting more. Leave your fancy degrees and your jobs and your cheese. It's time to change your point of view. Schmigadoon, there's a world to explore with a thrill behind each door. We got song, we got dance, lots of sex, no romance. We got it all and just for you. Schmicago, our fantastical farrago. Mystery and magic, endings that are tragic. Welcome to Schmicago.
They find the Broadway musicals of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, which is a darker, grittier, much more caustic world. So that becomes actually, I think, a really interesting place to think about what is happiness. If there are no happy endings, and I think where the Season 2 arc takes us is there's no such thing as a happy ending. That's a false idea. I do want to asterisk this because I know we're going to get to that end. I have a lot of questions about why Schmicago chooses to end their very dark arc in the way that it does. I have questions about that.
Yeah.
But that's our theological premise for Season 2. What is happiness?
Yes.
How do you and that becomes the thing that they are, the leprechaun shows up again, right? Like in order to cross back over the bridge back into your normal life, you have to find happiness, I guess. I mean, I think that's kind of what he asks them to do.
Schmicago welcomes your return. But it seems ye both have more to learn. For though 'tis true ye found true love, that isn't all ye have need of. So now it's here your lives ye'll spend until ye've made a happy end.
At first, they think is going to be a resolution of the injustice that happens to. He's accused of a murder he didn't commit. So, in some ways, I think season 2 is doing the Sondheim first act wrapped up, total cohesive story. Everything ends happily, and then that happens at the end of the end of episode 3, I think. And then there's 3 more episodes in Act 2 that then explode the happiness that everything goes wrong. Yeah, I think that's the structure we're working with in season 2.
Yeah. So into the world of, and it's a bizarre world the way they mix it up when I think about it, because you've got the shows that they're parroting, they're setting up, they're improvising on. You've got on the sort of dark side, Chicago and Cabaret and Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. Yeah, those are probably the 3 big, obvious. You've got characters lifted out of all 3 of those shows, almost wholesale.
Yeah. And then on the brighter side, I guess, you've got, Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, and the other Stephen Schwartz that you know well.
Oh, Pippin. I would put Pippin on the dark side, but yes, Pippin is also a lot of direct references to Pippin and to Hair, Godspell. Hair, Godspell get kind of mashed. Yeah. And then musical references to Jesus Christ Superstar. Really only, I think, I suppose the Krat, the bad guy, is both kind of Turpin, but then kind of becomes a Pharisee. Musically, he's a Pharisee from
because he's got a deep voice.
So there's a little bit of, he's got a deep voice, right? So that's voice casting. Yeah. But yeah, the direct references, certainly in terms of the characters, you've got Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett, you've got Sally Bowles, you've got the leading player from Pippin, you've got either sort of Jesus/Claude from Hair. Are those the... Well, and then I suppose the orphans from Annie also.
The orphans from Annie who end up to be the food
pretty direct appearance.
Meat pies that Sweeney Todd and the character of Mrs. Lovett is kind of mashed with Miss Harrington from
Hannigan, which is that's my favorite of all the mashups. It's never occurred to me that Mrs. Lovett and Miss Hannigan are not at all the same character, not at all the same musically, but what a great combo to give kind of Little Girls and The Best Pies in London as a mashup. I just thought this is why I tune into Schmigadoon, because that is what you will get, and you get Kristen Chenoweth doing it, which is perfect casting in both of those roles, right? The casting that she's never played Miss Hannigan to my knowledge, she's never played Mrs. Lovett, and I don't need her to because I've seen her do it now, right? I've seen that role happen, and it's just magical.
Yeah.
Good day, miss. Looking pretty, looking lonely. Looks like you could use a child or 2 or 3 for a very modest fee. If by any chance you're searching for an urchin, I got your merchandise right here. But I'll be clear, tell you straight, they're not great, and they don't appreciate they're possibly the worst brat in town.
So it's really Pippin that frames it. The character, the song, Magic. What's the Pippin song?
Magic to Do. That's the kind of the Yeah, that becomes Welcome to Schmicago is basically Magic to Do. Almost a whole. I think it's in where I started going down. This is where my nerdery took me this morning, Peter. Was comparing the Schmicago songs that are almost direct lifts. In fact, to the degree where it's like, is this a copyright infringement? Where it's like the piano riff is, the orchestration, everything is almost tit for tat. And there's other songs in Schmicago that are a little more, it's like inspired by, but doing something a little, or even sort of a mashup of stuff. But Welcome to Schmicago is in the same key as Magic
you discovered that.
That's, almost, yes. Wow. That's how I'm coding, where he's almost parroting the original material, he almost always preserves the original key. And that is a level of music, and that's kind of what makes my little musical geek heart sing, where like this guy is, and I heard Cinco Paul interviewed where he talks about like, you know, I'd listen to the score of a show, I would actually sit down and study the score. So he knows, he's a good musical theater technician. He knows the score really well, he knows the orchestrations really well, he's got the musicality in his ear. So when he sits down to basically kind of do a parody song of a particular song, he's doing it in the original key.
Right.
There's a couple places where he preserves, you know, almost beat for beat, the arc of a song, the musicality of a song, some of the particular vocal and musical riffs of a song. It's really, I mean, at one level, you know, it's a little, as I say, it's almost copyright infringement, but it's so faithful and it's so honoring of the original material. I think that's what makes me so happy, is this is a man who knows intimately the material that he's parodying. So it's never making fun of, it's never a send-up, it is always a loving homage. And that feels so right to me.
Well, and I don't know what generation he is, whether he's more your generation or mine or somewhere in between, I guess.
I think he's somewhere in between us. Yeah, I think he's a Gen Xer.
Yeah. So what I was immediately drawn to was my own autobiographical journey of growing up in the era of musical theater, of the Golden Age, largely. I mean, born in 1954, so a lot of these shows were happening. Sound of Music is 1965. And then something happened in the world, right? And certainly something happened on Broadway. And certainly something happened with Hair. And then with Godspell and with Jesus Christ Superstar. And I guess I'm just trying to place Cabaret. I think Cabaret is somewhere around Sound of Music, 67.
Yeah, isn't it like 60, 65, 66, 67?
Somewhere in there. Yeah. And so that zeitgeist of the changed world, right? The social revolution of the 60s, the cynicism of the 70s, away from the sunny costumes of the 40s and 50s and early 60s. He's really chronicling and parodying and sending up how that world changed for so many of us. And so, I mean, I was drawn in by that immediately. Like, no longer when you go to Broadway are you able to escape into a fairyland. Well, I guess they're always a bit of a fairyland.
Well, there's always a jukebox musical to,
And I'm thinking about the song, Do We Shock You? Where I think that gets, like,
that names it right out of the gate, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Do we shock you? Make you ill at ease? Do we offend your tender sensibilities? There's no norm we won't transgress. Look, there's a man and he's wearing a dress. Do we scare you? Are you too refined?
I'm into boys and girls.
Does that just blow your mind? Other girls get thanked and tipped. Us, we just like to get spanked and whipped. Does that shock you? We hope it shocks you. 'Cause we're really putting a lot of effort into it.
What's so great about Do We Shock You? And Josh and Melissa completely signaled this to us, is like, all of the things that they say to shock you are no longer shocking. It's, I have a tattoo, and he's like, okay. Like, so do I, sweetheart.
Like, come on.
I know. But that's, I mean, it's interesting though, because my sense is what that song is parodying, right? Like, nothing about this number is particularly shocking. But I think it's also asking us to think, like, was it in 1965? I mean, Peter, you were there. Right. I think, the moment when the cast of Hair took their clothes off, that was the only thing that people knew about Hair. Yeah. It was hugely shocking. I mean, theaters were shut down because they had to change the law in Great Britain in order for Hair to open on the West End, because it would have been illegal for them to. I think some of that was the Profanity Act. But Hair was a cultural reset for what you could do on stage. I think Sweet Charity, and that's the number that's being parodied, right? Hey, Big Spender. I think it was kind of, although it also got done in high schools. So I don't know. I have all kinds of questions about, like, was this really intended to shock, or Or is it a safe shock in the way that I think
and
Schmigadoon is asking us to think about
Cabaret
it?
absolutely had to change the lyrics of "If You Could See Her as I Do."
Right.
Until the movie, it wasn't. She wouldn't look Jewish at all, because that line the audiences could not accept back when it opened.
It did shock them. Yes, it did shock the audience. Yeah.
And certainly Jesus Christ Superstar, which we've talked about, was groundbreaking in its time. We've had that conversation. Godspell was seen by some as blasphemous, showing Jesus as a clown. It was a bit shocking. I mean, once you got there, once you got to Hair, once you got to JC Superstar or Godspell, it was so what? I mean, the nude scene in Hair was in so much darkness that you would have to have, X-ray vision to get off, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, but do we shock you? And to a certain degree, then, they also parody the naked moment in Hair, right? I think it's Everybody's Got to Get Naked is the song, so kind of making it explicit. But I think what the shock that's being played with in both of these numbers is, it's not really the shock of blasphemy. It's the shock of sex, right? And that is and you and I have talked about this, right? If we're gonna, I don't want to be reductive, but if we're gonna name the change that happens right around 1965, 66, 67, 68, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening there. The civil rights movement, the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. I also want to say the pill is the
absolutely.
big, this is the cultural reset here, right? Sex is no longer about reproduction.
Right.
Sex is for fun. And I think that's the shock of Hey Big Spender. Now, right? Like, do we shock you? No, you do not. A Man in a Dress is, right? Like, we are now, 50 years, 60 years out in, kind of sex is no longer shocking. In fact, in some ways, and I think this is kind of what Schmicago is gently asking us to think about, sex is kind of boring now, right? Like, there's, in some ways, like, it would be lovely, and the show kind of does. It's like, can this still titillate?
Right.
Can a bunch of, beautiful girls in basically their underwear dancing around on chairs, singing about, like, how depraved they are, can that still titillate? Or is that just campy fun? I think it's just campy fun.
Right.
And there's something a little bittersweet about that. Sex has lost its power to shock us. And I think a little bit, I don't know, I'm completely projecting a bunch, but I wonder to what degree the creators of Schmicago are asking us to think about that, right? Have we lost something in that sex no longer has the power to titillate or shock us? Have we become so demurred to, so kind of, accustomed to this level? Nothing here can shock us. We are so jaded, we're so sophisticated. And there's a little bit of a longing for the innocence of Sweet Charity, I suppose, and Hair. Like the days when you could show up at a Broadway theater and actors taking their clothes off in the dark was titillating and exciting and shocking and bad and nasty, and and you didn't want to see it with your parents.
Right. Right.
How does theater still have the power to shock us in terms of the sex aspect or not? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the thing about the pill was giving not just reproductive choice to women, but the opportunity for women to be as sexually free as men had always been.
Had been for hundreds and hundreds of years.
And that changed all sorts of dynamics. And in my mind, because I lived through that era, the pill and the Is God Dead cover of Time magazine are also conflated. And we have this reimagining of religion and spirituality that I think Schmicago actually engages. I remember when the first couple episodes aired and you and I were talking about, should we do a series on this? And you said something, well, yeah, I guess I'm not sure what there is theological about Schmicago. And then by the end of the final season, this is... and lots of people are going down many rabbit holes on the internet about Schmicago and all the references and that sort of stuff. But to our project, this is wildly theological.
I agree.
If not
agree.
Theological, and I think it's a theology that incorporates, or it's how theology had to change because of the pill, because God was dead, because the world is increasingly fucked up, which so theology had to be reimagined in the Hair, in the Pippin, in the Godspell, and the Jesus Christ Superstar. Very strong and persistent and consistent references throughout Schmicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and different. I mean, so if I'm gonna, different theologies in some of the, right? Like I think about like Chicago and Cabaret, which is kind of where Schmicago begins. Is with those kind of 20s pastiche. That's Candor and Ebb, right? It's the musicality of Candor and Ebb. So it's that's a particular kind of I want to say musical theater theology, right? Da 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 da. I mean, it's bright, it's flashy. This is Bobby, right? This is the lawyer character played brilliantly by Jane Krakowski.
Brilliant.
She's doing total flim flam, bamboozlery. It's like all of life is razzle dazzle. There is nothing authentic about. So we're doing this in the theater. This is meta theatrical stuff, right? Like it's often diegetic material, right? It's shows about show people. But the theology here is there is no such thing as truth. Truth is completely arbitrary. All it is dazzle. If you can dazzle them, you can get away with anything. It's a very, I think Cabaret actually then does kind of draw the line between if you can dazzle them, you can do anything, and the rise of fascism, which is a really important political aspect,
yes.
Right? But that's a theology, right? Yeah. There is no such thing as truth. There is only flash in the pan. There is only razzle dazzle. I think Pippin, to a certain degree, is playing with that idea too, and I want to flag this because I think the end of Schmicago does almost pull a Pippin punch that I want to think about. Basically, here again, right? Like, there's no such thing as authenticity. There's just show. Embrace the show. And at the end of Pippin, actually, Pippin pushes back. He refuses to burn himself, right? He refuses to go up in smoke at the end. He chooses this very simple love with Catherine, who he's found, and the leading player is infuriated and basically takes away the theater, and Pippin is left standing there in the house lights. Ta-da! And that's kind of where Schmicago starts to write its conclusion. This kind of basically a rejection of the theology that there is no truth, there is only flim-flam, and saying, no, actually, love is true. Love is not theatrical, love is not flim-flam, but love is true. And I think that's kind of where the Schmicago arc is going, right? It is not God is dead, there is no meaning, everything is arbitrary, so therefore, fuck it, just have a lot of fun.
Right.
That's actually not what Schmicago is saying. It's a little more traditionally Christian, I suppose, in saying love matters, truth matters, beauty matters. So in some ways, Schmicago is playing with the implicit theology of the musicals of the 70s and 80s, which are kind of caught. Now, Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, certainly, like there are other voices. Sweeney Todd, I want to flag, because that's as we have talked about, that's a deeply theological show, but it is basically a kind of, post-Christian God is dead, so there's only violence and vengeance. That's a even darker, I suppose, image of humanity than even Chicago and Cabaret offer. And Schmicago kind of dances up to that idea, but then really pulls back, right? This is not a show about the orphans are not going to get killed and eaten as they. Not really orphans, but I mean, Sweeney Todd, people are eaten, and in Schmicago, no one is eaten. We play with that idea. But at the end of Schmicago, Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett end up in each other's arms. I mean, it's a happy ending for every single character, other than Krat, who gets immolated. So my sense is Schmicago is engaging the 70s and 80s theology of nihilism and then rejecting it. And at one level, I'm like, that's a really interesting theological shift. And I have a lot of questions about it, because there's a piece of me that's a little disappointed by that. I would love to see the show really engage the death of God theology, as the theologians of the 60s and 70s and 80s did. What meaning is there in community? What is church? What is love? What is romance? What is sex? If there's no meta-narrative here of good and bad. How do we know what to do? What do ethics look like in a post-divinity world? I think that's that is the question of the latter half of the 20th century. It's certainly the question of the musicals. And I kind of want the show to engage that a little more. Not just play with it, not just kind of reference it, not laugh at it, but actually go there. And I feel like, the question that kind of frames this whole second season of Schmicago, what is happiness?
Right.
I think that is the question.
Well, and I think, I agree. And I think when that becomes the driving question, what is happiness? You kind of end up in, what is happiness for you? A kind of relativism. Mm-hmm. It becomes very focused on individualistic stuff as opposed to community things. Like, I don't get it. Even though everybody's singing and dancing at the end, or at least singing at the end, I don't get a sense that the town, that the people in Schmicago have been redeemed, that they are better. Everybody is sort of stuck, are they? I'm just trying to. I'm thinking out loud here.
Sure.
There's not a sense that the world's going to be a better place. It's going to be a better place for Josh and Melissa.
For Josh and Melissa,
they
as they go back to downtown Vancouver,
standing in for New York. And she gets pregnant, and I guess they live happily ever after. But has the world been transformed? I guess.
Yeah.
Their world.
Well,
Yeah.
Their world has, and the show does kind of play with this idea, right? The kind of the act break. Josh is freed from prison. Melissa, so it's like, oh, we've achieved happiness, we can leave, and they can't leave. So she says, oh, maybe we have to. Maybe it's not just about our happiness. Like maybe we have to. That becomes the second act of Schmicago. They start trying to pair everybody up, right? We got to get Jenny connected with her father again. We've got to figure out like who needs to fall in love with whom. They try to partner Jenny up with the Pippin character, with the Aaron Tveit character, Topher. We got to match everybody up. We got to get happiness for the community. It can't just be for us. So they do kind of play with this idea.
Yeah.
But like you, right? Like I'm a little disappointed in that ending because basically, as you say, like I guess Sweeney Todd, who whatever his name is, Dooley Pratt or something like that. I'm going to call him Sweeney. Alan Cumming does he does move past his vengeance arc. So I guess it's a very thin kind of redemption. It's a very schematic kind of redemption. Yeah. I don't really buy it. I don't buy it for Sweeney Todd. I don't buy it for Mrs. Lovett, mostly because I know the show that those characters are referencing, and I find the original material so much more powerful than if Sweeney and Mrs. Lovett decide, oh, I guess I don't really have to kill everybody. I can just find love instead. And there's a piece of me that's like, no, that's not what Sweeney Todd is. That's not what that show is about. Yes, at one level, killing people is not as good as falling in love with somebody. Yes, of course, I would rather have you fall in love with somebody, have really good sex with Kristen Chenoweth in a bed, and then, come back and sing a finale about how there's no such thing as a happy ending. There's happy beginnings. But I find that this is, I guess, the time to say, I find that final number of Schmicago really unsatisfying. There's no happy endings, no such thing as a happy ending. So at one level, this is the theology of the mid-century. So what? But then it returns to a kind of, I want to say, a kind of pablum. So what we've got is a happy beginning. And I want to say, like, is that all there is? Is that all there is?
You go,
I find that really unsatisfying.
Yeah, like I think it does ridicule in some ways. Especially in the everyone's got to get naked, and with the Godspell / Pippin / Hare troupe, who are kind of sent up as naive, a little dumb, well-meaning, out of touch with reality. When I was watching it, I was thinking, this is the way that I'm hearing critics of, in quotes, woke culture refer to those of us who embrace woke culture, right? We are naive. We're, if everybody loved everybody else, the world would be a better place. Mm-hmm. We got to make room for everybody, et cetera, et cetera.
The Topher's line is like, we've been protesting injustice by taking off our clothes and telling parables. And Josh is like, well, there might be, let's think about some other tactics by which we might attack an unjust society, because getting naked isn't going to do it.
The tribulation, the universe believes in you, and we do too. There's
I think that song is gently kind of parroting a certain kind of progressive culture, right? I mean, I suppose directly it's a 70s progressive culture. But I think you're right to draw the line to the contemporary world, right? It's not enough to take all your clothes, dance around naked. I mean, they're not all white kids in that cast. They're a very deliberately multiracial cast. But I think there is a little bit of a gentle parody of contemporary progressive woke culture. What is the mechanism by which society is going to be changed? Justice is going to be achieved for those who have not had it. It's not going to happen through taking your clothes off and telling parables.
Right. Nor is it reducing gospel to love. I mean, I get in trouble when I do preaching courses quoting Krister Stendahl, who one of his 10 commandments of preaching, the great Krister Stendahl, the New Testament scholar, became a bishop in the Lutheran Church, who said one of his 10 commandments of preaching is, do not use the word love in a sermon if it is not in the text you're preaching on.
Oh, that's good.
Well, it is good.
Yeah.
And I hear, to my horror, numerous preachers who you can almost smell the wood burning as they move through a text, trying to get to love. Love is the answer. And that kind of pops up with this troupe. It's
the flimsiness of that answer, right? Yeah, let's just take off. If everybody would just love each other, the world would be a better place, right? And I think both the mid-century musicals that Schmicago is referencing, and also from our contemporary vantage point, we would say, yeah, no bullshit. Like that's not actually. I mean, yes, I do believe that love. I do follow the teachings of Jesus. I do believe in the power of love, but not in that gimmicky kind of reflexive way that I think often, to your point, contemporary progressives revert to, right? If we could all just, and sometimes this becomes the way that we think about interreligious conflict, right? If we could all just realize that all religions are basically teaching us some version of the golden rule. And I think, no, actually I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's like, that's not a sufficient answer.
Right.
That doesn't negate the reasons why people have actual and real conflict with one another. I want Schmicago and I want contemporary people of faith to engage really honestly that love is not always, that might be where we end up, but saying it at the outset circumvents the whole struggle process of what it means to engage the other, what it means to engage somebody who's different, what it means to actually tear apart complicated questions about justice and ethics and what's right and what's wrong.
Well, and the only way they can really deal with evil is to drop the chandelier on the guy, right? Which is at some level saying, and I mean, I thought that was a brilliant moment. I laughed out loud.
It's a great moment. It's a great call out.
Spoiler alert, I guess, for anybody who hasn't seen it. But yes, what a brilliant way to go. But how do you deal with the collision between the world of cabaret and the world of Hair? Now, Hair, just to be fair to it, ends up actually being quite poignant because the protagonist, Burger, ends up going in the place of the other guy and ends up being killed in Vietnam. At least the way Milos Forman created the story for the film, which I think is as good as it's a whole other thing. But so there is this sense of standing in for love means sacrifice. I'm not talking about blood although I guess I am talking about blood sacrifice.
In that case. But yeah. And that's where Schmigadoon season 1, remember the sermon that Fred Armisen, the preacher, preaches, right? Like, love is not about being the perfect person or finding the perfect person. And then he quotes 1 Corinthians, right? Like, love is patient, love is kind. I think where he ends is love, it's about endurance, right? It's about staying in something hard. I think if there's a theological principle in Schmigadoon season 1, it's true love is sticking in something hard, even and especially when it is hard. Because that's actually real. Love is not the bright colors and the warm fuzzies and the easy, like, let's just all take off our clothes and writhe around on the floor a little bit. No, that's not love. That's something else. Love is a commitment to difficulty. Love is a commitment to pain, we might say. Love is a commitment to a kind of suffering. That is deeply Christian. That's how I want to think about the power of love in the Christian tradition. And I want to find that somewhere in Schmicago. I want to find that in the season 2 material, right? I think they're playing with that idea, right? Happiness is more complicated than a happy ending. There's no such thing as a happy ending. okay, yes, I like that idea, right? Like, we're not looking for everything to be wrapped up in a neat little bow at the end. Although then at the end of the thing, everything's wrapped up in a neat little bow.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I just find, I mean, I kind of like the song, you know, because it feels like Avenue Q to me a little bit. I think that's the musicality that I hear in, Happy Beginning, you know, it feels a little kind of dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, you know, everything's a little bit messed up, but okay, let's every day is a new day. And every day is a new day seems pablum-y to me.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in that because, I mean, I don't disagree with that. Every day is a new day. But as a theological / ethical principle to combat the nihilistic darkness of the world, I find that insufficient.
So what did you make of the sending up of parables? And I'm thinking particularly in the scene where Joshua is in jail, I guess, and Jaime is the guard, and Joshua.
Yeah, and Josh is almost.
There was once, a
rebel slave.
There was this, there was that, and it's connecting with the guard, right? I mean, he's clearly thinking about it, although clearly being smart isn't his strong suit.
No, he's not the smartest character in the world.
And
they
keep coming back to the parables. I mean, that's Godspell, because Godspell is based on the Gospel of Matthew, and they turn the parables and Godspell, as everybody knows, into theater games. But I wasn't sure what was what they're trying to say there about the parables. That they're made up, that they're bullshit, or that there's something about a story that will get through to somebody even more than a rational argument. Like
I mean, yeah. That, I feel like when you are the creators of a television show, you gotta at one level believe in the power of storytelling. I mean, at one level, at the meta level, I can't help but think some of this is about a little bit of this is a masterclass in how to tell and how not to tell a parable, right? Because it begins, and I think it's the second episode when the tribe puts on the lamb parable for John, and it's very Godspell and it's very stupid, and you can see him rolling his eyes at right, like, this is ridiculous. They are so earnest, they're trying so hard, and it's dumb. I mean, like, all of their impressions are bad. It's just not. It's a bad production of Godspell, I think, is what we're right. Like, this is bad. This is bad parables. Then they sing "Talk to Daddy" to Jenny, and they call that a, right? Like, and that's a different kind of a parable, right? That's a big splashy Broadway Fosse dance number. So that's it. So here's that's interesting, right? Every musical is a parable. Every song in a musical is a kind of a parable. That song is deliberately a parable. They actually tell the parable of the prodigal son in the context of the song. I think it's a guy named, I wrote it down. They talk about Pretty Penny, and they talk about Loco Lenny, whose dad gives him all the money, and Lenny spends it, and then he realizes his life has fallen apart, so he has to talk to Daddy. It is the parable of the prodigal son.
Talk to Daddy, talk to Daddy now.
Here's what I know about Loco Lenny. Was low on the dough, well, he hadn't any. His wealthy pa said, "I'll help you, sonny," but Lenny said, "Nah, I don't need your money." A few months passed, he was passed out in the gutter. You got real close, you could hear him mutter.
Mutter.
So,
Talk to Daddy, talk to Daddy. He will rock you when you are sad. He left you alone, but maybe he's grown. So talk to Daddy, talk to Daddy. Odds are you are.
So I think Talk to Daddy is a musical version of the prodigal son. They're telling the story of the prodigal son to Jenny, hoping that she will see herself in that story, realize, oh, I need to reconnect with my father. Her father is Sweeney Todd. This is, but that's how Josh and Melissa are attempting to find community happiness, right? And get out of Schmicago is by reconnecting Jenny with her dad, which they imagine will pull Sweeney Todd away from his need for vengeance and reunite the family, basically, right? Like, let's recreate the family if we can just get Jenny. So they use the parable of the prodigal son. And Jenny gets into the song, but completely, right? It does not resonate with her in any way. They're like, okay, well, that didn't work. So then, then the final moment is that scene in the boiler room, right? Where Josh, as the kind of the new Jesus character, the new kind of leader of the tribe, is frantically trying to come up with parables, basically in a kind of like 1001 Nights Scheherazade kind of, if I just keep telling parables to this guy, right, he's not going to kill me. I think that's a little bit what's happening there. And I think you're right. I think he does finally land on a story about it's the guard. I can't remember the name of the character. The guard who, you know, like it's suggested to us he has a longing to be on the stage. His uncle is Krat. His uncle has basically just kind of kept this kind of dangling promise. If you keep working for me, I'll eventually give you what you want. And so Josh basically tells him a parable about, like, you know, he's never going to give you what you want. You're going to have to take agency for yourself, like leave your uncle behind. By the end of the thing, we've discovered that the policeman's dream is to, you know, basically do Rocky Horror Picture Show as Frankenfurter. So that's fun. But there, I think the parable does finally work, right? Yeah. Josh figures out a way to basically preach a sermon in which that character sees himself and is able to confront his choices and make different choices. So there, I think, yes, that is how. So if I'm reading that at the meta level of the creators of Schmigadoon, you know, this is how a story can change somebody's life. And they really want to, right, hold that. And I'm sympathetic to that too, right? I do believe that a well-told story can change your life. I think that is the power of the gospel. I think that's the power of musical theater. I think that's the power of any kind of art form that gives us a story that is not directly about us, but allows us to see something, to project something, to engage emotionally in a story that might then cause us to make some different choices in our lives. Right. I think that is actually a beautiful illustration of how parables don't work and then how they can.
Yeah. And it's really then about the transformation of consciousness is the purpose of the parable. And I guess what I kind of liked about him trying a whole bunch of parables until he found one that worked.
Until he found one that sticks.
Isn't that the task for those of us who are preachers? Like you get up and you tell a story that has had maybe some transformative moment in your life and it just falls flat. People do not connect
does not
with
land.
it. But every now and then, I'd say by the grace of God, a preacher or a spiritual teacher finds that extraordinary moment where an ancient story connects with a contemporary experience, and you can just as a preacher, you can feel the energy shift. You can feel that folks have connected with this story in a deeper way, and that they're never going to, I was going to say, so let me say it. You're never going to see the world the same way. And is that about as much as we can hope for transformation? Is it, and then my critical mind starts saying, well, then you're just back into the world of individualism and really not into social transformation.
Individual transformation, yeah.
But social transformation's only going to happen if there is individual transformation, or are there deeper... structurally things have to change, I guess, would be my social justice.
Sure, yeah. The structural argument is like, I don't really care about changing people's hearts and minds. What I want is to change the structures of society so that I'm not, my life and people who are have less privilege than I am are not constantly, getting beaten and killed in the streets, right?
And if you change the structures, it's going to change the mindset. Is the notion there.
Sort of the argument there, yeah. No, I think there is something really interesting about, just kind of back to your point about preaching, right? Like there's a little bit of a cautionary tale in Schmicago around the danger of thinking as a preacher that I know the parable that's going to unlock something for somebody and basically inflicting it on them, right? That never works in Schmigadoon. And I think you and I can say as preachers, that never works in preaching either. When you think you know better than somebody else and you're trying to manipulate them into the transformation that you think they need, so you tell the story that you think is going to unlock that, 9 times out of 10, it either completely goes over their head and they're like, whatever, or they react really negatively, right? Like, don't like that, because that is fundamentally manipulative.
Exactly.
And I think that's the danger of, we might say bad musicals, bad TV, and I would say bad preaching, is trying to manipulate an audience to take them where you think they should go. Whereas I think like holy preaching, holy storytelling, is telling a story completely authentically, but then letting it go into the ether, into that space between an audience and a performer, and letting the spirit do whatever she's going to do with that story, and really kind of renouncing control over it. And I think, I'm putting a little too fine of a point on this, but I think that's kind of where Josh lands, right? I'm just going to keep throwing stories out there and hope that at some point the spirit is going to work in the heart of this police. I don't think Josh is thinking about the spirit, but like at some point, in a way that I actually have no control over, this will make a difference somehow. But I can't know how that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what story is going to unlock that transformation of the heart. I shouldn't know. I need to get out of the way so that the stories I have in my toolbox can do their work. But that to me feels like the sort of the cautionary tale there around trying to do something that's a little too didactic versus just letting a story happen and letting people engage it in the way that they feel called to.
Well,
which is, I think, really how transformation happens.
I think I agree. And I guess maybe if Schmicago is really about the transformation of Josh and Melissa, if they go seeking happiness, and I mean, the seeking of happiness is as old as the Greek philosophers, right? That was the big question of Aristotle and Plato. What is happiness? And I agree with Richard Rohr that a lot of what poses as Christian teaching is more Greek than Hebrew. It's not particularly the question that the Hebrew scriptures ask about happiness so much as it is about season 1 from Schmigadoon, which is endurance, right? It's being in for the long haul as opposed to finding happiness. And maybe here we have this kind of collision between the tragic worlds of Sweeney Todd and Cabaret, the naive world of Godspell and Hair, and Josh and Melissa kind of navigating their way, aware of the pain and injustice of the world, the Cabaret, Chicago corruption, and, the lawyer who can get you off from anything but turns against you, and the naivete, and ending up with, and this is to kind of the point you were making a while ago, there's no happy endings, but there are happy beginnings. We can have an attitude that can maybe propel us through a little way, but if the goal is happy ever after, is Schmicago saying that just doesn't exist and the best we can hope for is a happy beginning?
Well, that's what so is that enough? So the lyrics are, this world is a big old mess of pain and stress and people dragging you down. There's little chance of success and bad guys always winning. Then the shift, another voice comes in. Happy endings don't exist. But here's a pearl. See, and then this is where theologically, right? I think this is meant to be the show's pearl of great price. Here's a pearl you may have missed. Every day can be a happy beginning. Now, you tell me, you studied the gospel for longer than I have. I don't think Jesus ever says anything like every day can be a happy beginning.
Didn't Jesus say today is the first day of the rest of your life somewhere?
He did not say that. Jesus never says that. See, and that's where this is what I find so unsatisfying, because this show is created by a good Mormon boy. He knows his scripture. He's a follower of, I don't know, but my sense is like Cinco Paul is a follower of Jesus Christ. I think the teachings of Jesus Christ have shaped his outlook. And so what I turn to the show for is a really interesting contemporary riff on religion, on spirituality, on Christianity, on the church. And I find the idea that, maybe this is Rent, maybe this, No Day But Today. I don't know. I think there's a way of preaching what I think that song is trying to say that I actually do find powerful. At the end of Rent, when they sing "Forget regrets, for life is yours to miss, no other road, no other path, no other," that to me feels like if we're going to move the narrative of the Broadway musical forward out of the darkness of the 70s and 80s, we're going to move into the 90s. I want to hear Rent. I want to hear maybe Avenue Q, right? Which is a little bit of a spoof of Rent. Contemporary musicals actually are offering a certain kind of hope. I think the nihilistic world is a little bit, it's like that doesn't sell tickets at the end of the day. It does when it's Sweeney Todd and it's a revival. But people need a sense of hope. I think we want to leave the theater not with a sense of like, oh God, everything is unmitigated darkness. We want to leave with a sense of, okay, there's got to be some kind of meaning that allows me to step out of the world of the theater and into the world of my life. So I'm sympathetic to what I think the show is trying to do, which is not leave us in a moment of despair. And I find that the pearl of every day can be a happy beginning just doesn't really cut it for me.
Yeah. You and I just had the privilege of seeing the new production of Les Mis when we were in DC. And it does, the world is shit. The awful things happen. The good die, the bad prosper, the bad die, and you feel badly for them, and Javert dies, and that. But then at the end, just to your point, tomorrow comes. There is this. It leaves with this kind of. The struggle is worth it. There is redemption. there's hope.
I mean, some of this, I almost wanted to criticize the song at the level of the music. Like, if it had been a soaring anthem, like,
Right.
you know, like Les Mis, right? Where it's like the barricades coming back to life and they're like all the ghosts. I mean, there it's, I suppose, heaven. So it is a little bit of like, the redemption at the end of Les Mis is Jean Valjean goes to heaven and joins Fantine and Eponine and all of the boys on the barricades. But it is this idea, right? That like the movement continues, right?
Continues,
Each of us has our own moment. We all die, but the movement continues. The movement towards justice is continuing. That I do. And musically, when it's a big choral number, that has, like, I cry.
Yeah.
I cry at the end of Les Mis.
Yeah.
I cry at the end of Rent. So some of it's like the musicality of a big Broadway finale, even if the lyrics are kind of stupid, it works because of the music. And so there, my critique with Schmicago is like, don't start with a frickin' ukulele, you guys. Like, give us an anthem.
Yeah.
Give me something that's a little more than dink, dinka, 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 dink. I mean, like, I just, musically, I find that unsatisfying.
This world is a big old mess of pain and stress, and people dragging you down. There's little chance of success. The bad guy's always winning. Happy endings don't exist. But here's a pearl you may have missed. Every day can be a happy beginning. A happy beginning. This life's filled with sad goodbyes
and cloudy skies,
and days that don't seem to end.
The lows far exceed the highs. There's not much cause for grinning.
Happy endings don't exist.
But here's a pearl you may have missed.
Every day can be
A happy beginning.
But I wonder, just going back to Mormon roots for Cinco Paul, the LDS theology is really about the happiness of a family and families being reunited. I mean, this is the notion of eternal marriage, celestial marriage, where you marry not just on earth, but also for eternity. And you are reunited with your nuclear and extended family on your own planet. They have a very sophisticated cosmology of what eternal life looks like, but it is rooted in the nuclear family. And I wonder, the happy beginning at the end, we have
Melissa getting pregnant, isn't it? I mean, like,
there you go.
Yeah, she gets pregnant, which is what she, I mean, like, it's into the woods, I suppose. They go into the woods to have a child, and they come out of it and they get their child.
So the salvation is the birth of a child, is a happy couple who have survived by self-reliance. These are big themes in Mormon theology that I think make Mormon theology, and I'm not putting it down, I have respect for it, but I don't think it's Christian.
Not in the sort of the New Testament sort of way that we... Yeah.
I mean, and for me, that's a statement of respect for the specificity of LDS theology. It's explicitly not Christian in the same way that even though Christians share a testament with Jews, it would be wrong to say that that
Christian theology is Jewish theology.
It's not.
Right.
It's a different thing.
Yeah, very different.
So I just wonder, it was you that started with this, with the happy beginning thing. And Cinco
well,
Paul.
and that is kind of, if there's redemption at the end of that, I mean, it's Josh and, it's kind of the Pippin ending. It's Josh and Melissa basically, that's actually where I wish the show had just ended, with the Pippin ending, right? Where Josh and Melissa turn to each other and say, yeah, this whole thing is fucked up, but I love you.
Yes.
You are enough for me. It's not perfect. This is not a happy ending. We're going to continue to struggle. We may not make it. We may not get pregnant. I may end up falling in love with somebody else and leaving you. But what we have is real. I can look into your eyes. I believe in you. We know each other. I think she even says, like, I want to be with somebody who knows me.
all that he said was true. There are no guarantees for me and you. And magic is great every now and then. But I want more.
The world can be cold and dark, but when we connect, it makes a spark, and maybe that spark will go out again, but I want more. I can tell just what you're feeling. There are things you can't conceal. Sometimes life can send you reeling, but what we want, all that we want, is something real.
There is something very powerful to me. That's a little different than the power of the nuclear family, but it is grounding. It's very individualistic, but it is grounding meaning in personal relationships, and that I do find satisfying at the level of pop culture, at the level of musical theater, maybe even a little bit at the level of theology. Right? That like if Christ is going to show up in my life, it's going to be in the body of another person, maybe in the corporate body of a gathered community. That is where God shows up. That I think that's also the place where the individual story and the community story find resonance, right? It's not one or the other, it's both. Happiness happens for us, transformation happens for us individually, it also happens for us in community, and those are linked. They're not separate. So there is something magic to me about that, and I wish that then what had happened in Schmicago was what happened in Pippin, where the leading player says, all right, like, get out of here, you assholes, right? Like, we're going to take our flim-flam story and take it away. And basically, it's like all of the lights, all of the costumes, all of the glamour goes away, and it's just two people, naked, I suppose, before their god, in their kind of detritus of costumes, standing there holding hands. I mean, at the end of Pippin, actually, it is an image of a nuclear family. It's Pippin and Catherine and her little boy. I can see how, as a Mormon creator, I would look at that image and be like, okay, right, that's actually consonant with my theology of how God shows up in the world, how transformation happens. So I'm not opposed to that. I actually find, at one level, I find family to be a really beautiful way of thinking about how redemption might happen. That's a slightly more corporate understanding than romantic love.
Yes.
So I'm on board with that, right? Romantic love is not enough, but the love that knits people together in the weird messiness of a family, there's something holy there.
Yeah.
I've beaten this horse to death, but I am not interested in shifting to every day can be a happy beginning.
I know.
Okay.
I know. I guess the only piece of that kind of resonates with me is in the Johannine sense of eternal life. Like, in John's gospel, it's not about the kingdom of God. It's about eternal life. And eternal life isn't, I don't think, I would submit, isn't about immortality of human personality. It is about
pie in the sky when you die.
Right,
yeah.
It is about those moments where it all comes together, where you understand the divinity in your midst, that God is present with you. Eternal life is at one level, it's complex and it's reductionistic to try to put it all in one simple sentence, but it's those moments where we are deeply aware of the presence of God in life, in the world.
Yeah.
And in that sense, happy beginnings.
Well, in that sense, I suppose,
guess.
right? So the final image of Schmicago is, they turn the corner. Melissa's in that red coat. It's an echo to the end of the Godspell film, right? Like the world starts to come to life, and they get lost in the crowd of people, but the black and white world starts to take on color. So I think what that's illustrating visually is what you're talking about, right? Heaven is now. Heaven is here. Eternity is right in front of you. So at that level, if that's what we mean by every day can be a happy beginning, okay, yes. Every day I have the possibility of encountering the holy in the people around me, in the leaves and trees and rocks and, in the world that God has created, which is beautiful and always being redeemed. I think there is something theologically powerful there. So thank you for given me another way of thinking about that really stupid song that I don't love at the end of Schmicago. Because in every other respect, I have so much love for this material. I admire, respect the layers of what they're doing. Yes. It's very funny. It's so clever. Sometimes the jokes are a little over the top, whatever. But like, I love the project. In some ways, the project of Schmigadoon, if I'm going to, feels to me so similar to what you and I have been trying to do on this podcast, right? Help musical theater fans both remember why they love this stuff and also connect it to the deepest loves, which is not just about flim-flam and excitement, although there is nothing wrong with flim-flam. When Jane Krakowski does Dance 10 Looks 3 all over it. And my favorite Easter egg in the whole thing is when she comes sliding on in the roller skates.
Yes.
Which is, I think, an echo to the fact that Jane Krakowski began her Broadway career in Starlight Express. Yes. So it's like layers of call out, and I'm so here for all of it. So nothing wrong with the campiness of it.
And we didn't talk at all about the song that is a lift from Chorus Line.
Oh my gosh, that which is my favorite song in the whole thing. I need to eat. Why did I have so many kids? Why did I need to sell my kids? I think that's right.
It's right. It's
so good.
Lift, and it's
hysterically
funny.
I need to eat. I need to eat. Last night my dinner was a candle. The landlord's calling. I'm out of fishnets. There's not much more that I can handle. How am I gonna feed my kids? Why did I have so many kids? I think I'm gonna have to sell my kids.
I think the project is extraordinary. It's you keep talking about Easter eggs, and you're absolutely right. This is just Easter egg after Easter egg to open and savor, and it bears, in my view, repeated watchings because you're going to find something else that you missed the first time. So layered,
yeah. But it's also it's using this material to preach. I mean, I think Schmigadoon is a sermon in the best, or parable, we might say, in the best way. Asking us to look at a story, some story that we think we know, think about the stuff we love about it, the stuff that we find problematic about it, but then kind of, think about how will this change me? I don't know that Schmigadoon is going to change me in any, transformative way. But that feels to me like the project of a good musical, right? That like you're asked to sit in the theater for a couple hours, encounter a story that will really move you. And in that is enough. Yeah.
I also think it's wonderful that it is unremarkable that the protagonists are a mixed race couple. That is, you go back to South Pacific, where mixed race couples is the moral center, the ethical question that drives South Pacific in so many ways. And here we have Josh and Melissa, and that's not even a problem. Or is it a problem? I don't...
Well, yeah, I don't know. We talked about this with Schmigadoon season 1. Like, that was one of my questions about the first season was, it was a colorblind world. We never named, really, the racial elements. And there's a little bit of me that thinks, yes, I mean, what a beautiful image of the kingdom of God, right, in which... The differences that we see as so determinative do not have power to subjugate some people and privilege other people. Yes. And in the world in which we live, and certainly in the world of the contemporary theater, I think a piece of what we're being asked to wrestle with is who benefits from that colorblind story. It tends to be the people who don't ever really have to deal with the fact that their skin color opens all sorts of doorways for them and never shuts a door. So I do have questions about the colorblind world. And with you, I feel like, yes, there is something really beautiful and powerful to me in a world in which that is not the determinative thing that makes, that separates some people from other people. I do find that really interesting. I also have questions about it.
And Josh sings way more and way better.
Way more and sings great. Keegan-Michael, he's a singer.
He's a singer. I mean, it's not a Josh Groban voice. It's a musical actor
but he acquits himself.
But absolutely.
He acquits himself very effectively.
And Cecily Strong is
I love
fabulous.
That he finally finds his, in some ways, like this is Josh's season in some ways, right? Cecily Strong's character, she's in love with Brigadoon. That's her sweet spot. But as soon as Josh sees the magic to do, he's like, oh, I could get into this, right? Like, and then finds his role, right? Like he's a cult leader. I think we get to see the side of Josh that we don't really get to see, that he longs to be a kind of to have that kind of power over people, right? To be and he's a charismatic leader of a movement. That's kind of the temptation that he flirts with. And I love seeing Josh in that way. He's got charisma.
And he moves away from his identity being tied up as being a medical technologist, right? Into discovering the spiritual side, the more affective, the more artistic, the more aesthetic.
He can tell a good parable. He's a good preacher. No, there's a vocation, I would say, in this guy's life. I would say that for Melissa too. She has that moment, right, where she finally takes the spotlight. Maybe this is my chance to be the diva I have always been longing to be. And you see how good she is. She is so good. So yeah, I love that they both kind of get the thing that they've been wanting, and then in the style of the mid-century kind of dark musical, discover it's not all that it's cracked up to be, right? Like it's not happiness. That's not the same as happiness. Finally getting your dream fulfilled is actually not the same thing as happiness. That does feel to me very astute theologically. Happiness is not found in doing the thing that you have always dreamed about doing and then getting it. There's a whole different narrative then that happens on the other side of that. Yeah. So I've been watching, because in some ways this show also maps onto the trajectory that this podcast has been taking as we've sort of taken ourselves through the world. So I've been thinking a lot about where do you and I want to go next. And I'll just say this publicly on mic. I've got a little bit of a hankering to go down the Stephen Schwartz road. I mean, and some of it's being reminded by Schmicago of how much I love Pippin, how much I love Godspell, how much I love Wicked.
Yes.
There's a lot of good Stephen Schwartz stuff that we have not covered on this podcast that I would love to talk about. So I'm just throwing that out there. If like me, you've got a hankering to think theologically about Stephen Schwartz, let us know.
Well, and Stephen Schwartz is also the lyricist for the Bernstein Mass.
Yes. Yep. And the music and lyricist for the children of for the Prince of Egypt and a bunch of other kind of Disney.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And not just Disney film. He's done some directly theological material. I would say more than other writers. Godspell, Children of Eden, Prince of Egypt. This guy is gauging directly in in Hebrew tradition and in Christian tradition as well.
Cool. Let us know what you think.
And we'll be back in a podcast feed near you at some point in the future.
Until next time. Thanks, Nathan.
Until next time. Yep.
The Gospel of Musical Theater is a production of Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in Portland, Oregon. Join Peter and Nathan every other Friday right here in your podcast feed, and connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at GospelofMT. Learn more and support us at trinity-episcopal.org/podcasts. See you next time.